Welcome to Dolphins In Depth. I'm your host, Omar Kelly, and you are watching a podcast for a team that pulled off a victory against the Los Angeles Rams. Barry, it was a game that Miami pretty much had control of. Majority of the contest wasn't the cleanest game, wasn't necessarily the sloppiest game, but I will make the argument to you, Barry, outside of the Buffalo Bills, this was the best opponent that the Miami Dolphins has faced all season, and somehow they pulled off a victory.
Yes, and a lot of people won't realize that because of how meek the Rams offense looked last night, which was thanks to the Dolphins defense. But Matthew Stafford-led teams had scored a touchdown in every game except for one of their previous 49. So what the Dolphins did last night, holding them without a touchdown, was really unusual against the Matthew Stafford quarterback team. And this leads to the point, Omar, that I've consistently made about why I don't think you rip apart this team, why you don't trade the core. There are a core here of really good players. If there were better moves around the margins, they might be able to get to that level from 6th or 7th or 8th best in the AFC to something higher if you make some moves around the edges that are impactful. But last night showed that this nucleus of players is good enough to win with and be relevant with. Not win a Super Bowl with, but win enough to have an entertaining, quality playoff contending product. Last night, I think, was validation of that. The question is, was the hole too deep, Omar, that they've already dug? They're 3-6 to get out of, or do you see a path now possibly to postseason with their chances estimated in the 10 to 20% range by people who do these calculations?
Yeah, you know what, Barry? I think the worst has already happened to them. I mean, when you lose your quarterback for the first four games of the season, when you lose Jalen Phillips for the entire season, you've gone through. The only thing that hadn't happened to this team, which surprisingly is beginning to happen to them now, is that their offensive line had been relatively healthy for the entire season. But Zach Sieler, to Javon Holland, to Kader Kohu, they have weathered and endured enough trauma and drama for an entire season. And now it's about getting whole, building confidence. The one thing that I will give this team credit for is that the leadership had always been steadfast. We are better than we're showing. We're a committed team. We're continuing to work. We're continuing to double down on cleaning up our team and our execution. I can't really recall any bad, what are they doing moments outside of, Tua diving to make the tackle. And I don't disagree with him on that play, because from the standpoint of Tua's mindset, he's just playing football. And, that was a football move, football play, horrible tackling for him, but he was trying to get a defender down to prevent him from scoring points. I think Tua's never going to have that switch of, I'm going to protect myself. But I really can't think of any boneheaded moments or fumbles. Interceptions are going to happen. Even fumbles are going to happen. But they played a very clean game. I don't think they particularly played well offensively. The run game, 60 rushing yards, that's not who they are. I think the Rams took a lot of that from them. Tua talked about how, the cornerbacks were really playing gap integrity, trying to help them stop the run. My thought is that should have opened up something in the passing game. It didn't. The offense still isn't in sync, but ultimately I think the defense finally stepped up and did their part. But it also helped that they had everybody from Zach to Javon to Kader, back in the fold.
Yeah, a couple really encouraging things on defense last night. Seeing the continued progression of Chop Robinson, his second sack in 2 weeks. We saw Quentin Bell, Mr. August. He made his first play since like August 10th. He had the sack late in the first half. Javon Holland blitzing. I really like that. Omar, you saw a sack from him last night. Campbell was terrific with the sack, with the tackle for loss, with the bat down. Deshaun Hand, your guy, quietly underrated quality performances all season, forced the fumble that Kendall Fuller recovered. Rams averaged just 3.9 per carry. They were 3 for 12 on third down. So the Dolphins' third down defense, which was excellent the first 6 weeks, then had a little bit of a letdown. Excellent again last night. The concern I have moving forward is Kendall Fuller's in concussion protocol for the second time. And with all that we know about concussions with Tua, it's known science that if you have 2 concussions in a short period of time, it's not good. And your chance of a second concussion not long after the first is not good. So the question is how long they sideline him for. Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? And can you trust Cam Smith in his absence. So going into last night, Cam Smith had been targeted 10 times. He had allowed 9 passes. Last night, immediately targeted when he came in the game, gave up 2 sizable completions, then was probably at fault on a play late that Troy Aikman criticized him for. So here's my question. Do you open up the competition for your top boundary backup corner job with Ethan Bonner and Storm Duck and Cam Smith? Do you give Nick Needham a fresh look, or do you keep rolling out Cam Smith and hoping that things will get better?
I think you have to keep rolling out Cam Smith, because while we are making progress and making development, this is still about giving those young players, putting them in the pool and seeing if they can sink or swim. If Cam Smith isn't going to be part of this rebuild and part of this regime, it can't be counted on. We need to know that. I know he's giving up a lot of completions, but he's also being targeted a lot, just like Cater was last year. We knew Cater was a better player than he showed, but when you got Jalen Ramsey on the field, the other guy is going to be targeted. And so teams are going after Cam Smith. Now, the question is, what is he going to learn from these experiences? How is he going to grow? But I definitely do believe that it should be an open competition. If, clearly Ethan Bonner isn't in the mix, but if Storm Duck can beat out Cam Smith, then certainly they should let it. I think Nick Needham's days as a cornerback are long in his past. If he could have helped this team as a nickel cornerback, he would have during Cater's absence. So to me, this is more about Cam Smith. We got to throw you in the deep end, see if you sink or swim. That's another issue. But then, Barry, I'm also a little bit worried about this offensive line. From our inner workings, I was going to write last week that, hey, Chris Greer might be getting the last laugh on this offensive line because they had been playing so well, so admirably. But then Austin Jackson got hurt. Then I said, wait a minute. Let me pause that. Let me put a timeout, because one thing I'm always concerned about is what happens to your offensive line when it gets watered down. Now we've got Kendall Lamb out there at the right tackle. I think he will get better. I don't think he had his best game yesterday, but I think he'll get better as the season progresses. Clearly, Austin Jackson's going to be sidelined for 4 games, with a knee injury. I suspect, no knowing knowledge, but if you sideline him for 4 weeks, we're having a clean out. We're getting in there. We're looking at it. We're repairing it. We're seeing what's going on in regards to the swelling and getting it fixed. And hopefully he can come back in a month. Kendall Lamb is more than likely going to be that right tackle. But you also lost Robert Jones in that game. Knee injury. We don't know how serious it is. Lester Cotton gets into the fold. And as much as I like Lester Cotton, admirable guy, Lester's always encouraging us if we need to get our lift in on Thursdays. I do worry about the drop-off. Now, Isaiah Wynn has been working. He's progressively doing more. Now the question is, he's getting closer to having his window open. Now the question is, can Isaiah Wynn be counted on to help you in the second half of the season? Is this the time where his window gets opened and we see whether or not he can contribute and help us returning to that starting left guard spot?
Yes. Well, at the time of this taping on Tuesday, we haven't spoken to McDaniel yet, but what he did say about Isaiah Wynn last week is that he and Cam Good are closer than Bradley Chubb to returning to practice. And remember, the quality of play that Isaiah Wynn gave you at left guard the first 7 games last year before the quad injury against Philadelphia on that Sunday night game was really, really good. He was one of the best pass blocking left guards in the league. His run blocking was above average. So sure, he'd give you a huge lift. The question is he ready to come back in the next couple of weeks? But last night was the night that their offensive line issues finally caught up to them, partly because of attrition, as you said. They missed Austin Jackson. They also missed Alec Ingold last night, so that shouldn't be understated. But the Dolphins gave up 13 quarterback pressures last night, according to Pro Football Focus. Kendall Lamb allowed 3. Cotton allowed 2. He was charged for a sack. Both of the sacks permitted or the 2 sacks charged to the offensive line in Pro Football Focus's estimation were the fault of the left guards. Exactly. Robert Jones with 1 before the knee injury, Lester Cotton with the other. And even though Austin Jackson hasn't had a great year, he's had a solid year. You missed his athleticism in the wide zone runs last night, and you definitely missed Ingold. So the question is, was last night an anomaly with the running game, averaging under 4 yards per carry, or are you a little concerned about blocking in the run game heading into November?
I talked to Kendall Lamb. I'm not Kendall Lamb. I talked to Teron Armstead after the game, and he gave the Rams a ton of credit. He was like, that's the best defensive line that we faced all season. These young boys, he said 8, he's going to be a beast in the years to come. So I watched the game. I thought the Rams were killing it. It wasn't a lack of performance. They just had some dogs on that defensive line. I would love to see some dogs like that on Miami's defensive line. If only they had drafted a couple of them. It has me concerned, but I need a bigger sample size because the run lanes weren't there either. And whether, I know Dolphin fans are all obsessed about Jalen Wright. Well, Jalen Wright had his opportunities and did nothing with them.
Right. Played well on the first drive, struggled late. And we haven't yet brought up the big news from last night. No Raheem Mostert carries, had 2 catches. And it's interesting because last week when McDaniel was talking about the 2 big fumbles that Mostert's had in the last 3 games, he kind of made it sound like he was on double secret probation where he'd get another chance and then maybe be removed if he fumbled again. So I think everyone was surprised that he had no carries at all last night. McDaniel assuredly will be asked about that later today on Tuesday. I would have given him carries. I would have given him carries. To me, I cannot lose trust in a guy who's got an historically high per carry average because of 2 sacks or because of 2 fumbles, especially because he knows it's been an issue. You knew he would have taken extra care of the ball had he gotten the ball. So I would have given him work last night. I would hope that he's not being phased out moving forward. Your position on the Mostert thing is what?
He was used primarily as a third down back, which I think is an acceptable and fair role for him. There's a balancing act there. I also know that Mike McDaniel and the coaching staff, they believe in if you perform in practice, you will get those opportunities. That's who we're going to build the game plan around. So if Jalen Wright outperformed him in practice, I don't have a problem with him getting that number 2 role. Now, also, we cannot talk about Mike McDaniel being a loosey-goosey coach and no consequences to your action and no punishments and nobody ever gets demoted. And then when he starts doing it, chastise him for what are you doing here? You demoted Raheem Mostert. In fairness to Mike McDaniel and the coaching staff, if this was what was done, Raheem had fumbled twice, costing the team 2 games. Punishment is merited, Barry. If we're going to sit here and say, Mike McDaniel, Mr. Nice Guy, there's never any consequences to anything he does. And then when there are consequences, we say, what are you doing here?
No, your point is fair. And I agree there should have been consequences. My only question is, should there have been a few carries? You can certainly bench him to the extent of you're not going to give him a heavy workload, but should there have been at least a couple carries? But I want to mention a couple of things that pleased me last night. One is they've eliminated the penalty issue. It's become progressively less of a problem in recent weeks, only 1 last night for 5 yards. I love McDaniel's aggressiveness running out the clock late. Instead of running the ball on 3rd down up 20-12, instead we saw Tua throw to Beckham. Then we saw Tua throw to Malik Washington. And one other takeaway that I had last night that I mentioned at MiamiHerald.com, when they viewed their offense this offseason, they identified 2 areas where they said, we need to be better. We need to give McDaniel and Tua more options at number 3 receiver, knowing that Cedric Wilson and the cast of characters they had at number 3 receiver last year could not get open. So they bring in Beckham. They had to wait a while for the payoff, but they got it last night. I know only 2 catches, but one of them was huge, prolonging that final drive with that catch for 11 yards. The other thing that they identified about the offense during the offseason was we need a safety valve, someone who can give us yards after catch at tight end, someone who can get open when you're seeing 2 high shells, when you're seeing Tyreek and Jalen being blanketed. Jonnu has been that the last 5 weeks. We saw the big 33-yard catch and run last night that set up the Tua TD catch or Tua TD throw to Tyreek Hill. So last night, I think, was the first time we saw their offseason vision of how they improved their offense with Jonnu Smith, with Odell Beckham, both give you something tangible and meaningful in a win. So I thought that was a positive. How did you think Tua played, and do the fumbles concern you? 20 of them now in his last 24 games. 20 fumbles in 24 games. He's awfully lucky they've lost just 7 of those 20.
It's a problem. And Tua, the protection has to be better. And that's both me and you, Barry. We've said this for eons. The Dolphins have to get better on their offensive line, and I still believe that. More has to be invested into that offensive line to make it a little bit more secure for Tua. It wasn't as if the Rams were giving him the ridiculous pressures that he wasn't prepared for. It's just there was a ton of leakage. And I don't want to make excuses for Tua because you've got to be able to hold on to the ball. but you got to get that pressure better. I mean, you got to get that protection better. And yes, losing Ingold, but let's not act like Ingold plays 40 snaps a game. He's not always and consistently out there. But Julian Hill also. I'm a Julian Hill supporter. I know he's a better run blocker than everybody else on the roster. However, when you're on the field in pass protection, you got to do more than what you gave against the Los Angeles Rams. And I know
he struggled last night. Still led tight ends in snaps, but last night was not a banner game for him. I want to give a quick shout out to Malik Washington. There's no one on offense who has improved more from early August than Malik Washington. You and I saw him out there in training camp like a fish out of water, didn't know what he was doing. You wondered, how could this guy have caught 114 passes last year in college? But you know what? He's a studious guy. He has skills. The speed has impressed us, maybe more than it impressed you in August, and he's helping. He helped on the end around, obviously, for the touchdown early. He made the big catch late, and it's telling that he's playing more than Beckham. Just a few more snaps than Beckham, but he's getting consistent playing time. 4 snaps for Craycraft in his first game last night. We know that Rivers trusted by the coaching staff. Malik played the most of the number 3 receivers last night.
No question about it, and I've been very critical on Malik Washington. I just didn't see it during training camp. Now, that's a young rookie who probably was in a little bit too deep. He also battled some injuries, fought through it, had a good final preseason game. But who would have ever thought that he'd be doing an end-around guy? He took over some of Tyreek Hill's plays. And I said, hey, this looks good. And certainly teams weren't expecting it, which is why the end around was so successful. They're like, what? You got Jalen Waddle and you got Tyreek Hill and you're giving an end around to Malik Washington? So props to him. Talked to him after the game. That was his first NFL start. He did work in the starting lineup. And props to the coaches, because I know they always try to reward guys who do well in practice that week. And so to give the young rookie his first NFL start and then call a critical play like that leads to a score, props to them. Also, we got to give credit. If we're giving shout-outs, we got to give credit to Anthony Walker. Week number 2 as a starting inside linebacker paired with Jordan Brooks and getting the job done, got an interception. There haven't been that many big runs. Everybody's assignment-based, the green dot player right now, so he's the one that's leading the defense. This is a very tough situation for this coaching staff because David Long is a captain, a very well-respected player. But if your defense is responding to Anthony Walker more than it is responding to David Long, and your coverage is a little bit better, and I don't even know if tight ends were a factor in last night's game. Props to Anthony Walker for how he's performing, how he's playing, pulling down his first interception of the season and 4th of his NFL career. I do want to say to him, commend him, because not only is he a Dolphins player, but he's also Pace's defensive coordinator, helping out his father's team. I don't know if they're in the postseason or not, but here's a guy doing double duty. Not only is he playing for your Miami Dolphins, but he's also coaching high school football. Commendable for him. I also want to commend Javon Holland, because a lot, not a lot is being said publicly, but a lot is being said privately about Javon and whether or not he wants to play and how scared is he about, how committed is he to the season. He didn't get his money, so is he guarding himself? I say this, and I defend Javon in so many instances, because all it takes is you going out there on a sore knee, something negative happens, next thing you know, you tear your ACL. You tear your ACL, and now you go from an $8 million a year player to a minimum salary player. I do not take those risks, and you, as the Miami Dolphins, put me in that situation. So do not judge me for being cautious with my injuries.
Right, now, especially as a looming free agent, no question about it. I got 2 more shout-outs, too. Zach Sieler, he is such a soothing presence on the field. He makes a difference consistently. As I've said, the best acorn of the Greer era in terms of finding someone who nobody had ever heard of and making him a very good player. All the credit to Sieler. Set the tone early with the 10-yard tackle for loss on the reception on the Rams' first play. And last night, Omar, was a banner night, I thought, for defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. He devised a really good game plan, mixing some blitzes at appropriate times. We know that Anthony Weaver, from being in a room with him now a bunch of times, he's got a presence about him that will impress any NFL owner. He's just an impressive guy. You can tell he's a leader of men. You combine that with the X's and O's scheme that we saw last night before a national audience. That's the type of thing that helps get you interviews, at least if not a job as a head coach moving forward. So an excellent night for their defensive coordinator. And we cannot let the show end without talking about the latest merriment around Tyreek Hill, where he tells ESPN before the game that he has a torn ligament in his wrist, and it was re-aggravated because of the altercation with police, where he was not arrested, but he was detained, he was handcuffed. Then after the game, I saw you guys, Marcel Louis-Jacques, everyone asking Tyreek, well, did the police incident cause this? Tyreek said, I don't want to discuss it. So he discussed the police before the game. He didn't want to discuss the police after the game. He then told NFL Network that he aggravated it by blocking because he's been doing a great job blocking. So I don't know what aggravated it other than the fact that he got the injury in the Commanders' preseason practice in August. It's obviously bothering him. Commend him for playing through it. Let's just hope it holds out through January.
Hold on here. Let me put a timeout on this. And you know how I feel about Tyreek, who I have called a habitual liar. And I stand on that because for 3 years, I've documented Tyreek's fabrications of the truth. One, the thumb injury that he suffered against Washington, I remember it was a thumb injury. And it wasn't a wrist injury. And that was also to the right hand. Now we're talking about an injury to the left hand. I don't know what to believe with Tyreek all the time. It just these tall tales and these stories, and I'm not calling him a liar, but the injury you had against the Commanders was your right hand. Now this is allegedly your left hand. What are we doing here?
And then saying that Odell injured him on the celebration, which, by the way, was maybe a little bit too aggressive. And then Tyreek trolling everyone by saying, I'm hurt from the celebration. I'm going to have to probably miss Wednesday's practice, which he would anyway because of rest. So you just never know what you're going to get with Tyreek. It's a box of chocolates, but he gave him at least something last night. Low numbers, but he gave him the TD. He can always be used as a decoy. Yeah. He had a couple runs. His presence, obviously, on the field is very meaningful, whether he's giving you, pure stats or not.
Here's the thing that I found very admirable about Tua, and I don't know if the Tua doesn't lie, so I'm never going to accuse Tua of lying, unlike a certain individual. Tua says that Tyreek is being the consummate team player. Numbers aren't important to him. He's not talking about 2K. He's even said, I'm not even going to get 1,000 yards. But what the things that he's taking pride in is his blocking. And Tua saying he's even going to Mike and calling running plays and feels like he can get this guy blocked. That'll open up the creases. I have seen it because I've documented. I've been in there in the locker rooms after these losses. These receivers are having a tough season, an emotional season, and I think as long as there's winning, it soothes everything. Now, Tyreek obviously gritted out, played for his team, and I think he was a great decoy. The touchdown pass in the end zone, to me, that was a great play design. I always question and wonder, how are these guys who are about this big ever going to get open and ever going to score in the red zone? Well, they found ways to make it happen. So props to the Miami Dolphins. I always think about that. Adam Gase always found a way to get touchdown passes in goal line areas. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why can't the Miami Dolphins do that? But it seems like they're finding a way right now. So commendable to them. Now, Barry, this is a 2-game stretch, and let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, you got to take care of business against the Las Vegas Raiders, and then you've got the New England Patriots coming to town with their rookie quarterback. Let's say the Dolphins take care of business the next 2 weeks. Does it right the season that they've had so far?
It does. It leaves you at 5-6, and then that 6-game stretch to end the season. If you can win 4 of the 6 to get to 9 wins, you're at least in the tiebreaker discussion. If you win 5 of the 6, you're probably the 7th seed, if not the 6th seed in the AFC. The question is, of those 6, can they realistically win at least 4 at Green Bay, at Houston? Obviously, the toughest challenges, San Francisco at home. So those are the 3 really difficult ones. Then 2 against the Jets, who are in the toilet, and then 1 at Cleveland, which obviously has not had a very good season. So, yes, you can see a path where they could win at least 3 of those 6 questions. Can they win 4 or 5? They're going to have a win even bigger than the one last night, whether it's at Green Bay on Thanksgiving, whether it's at Houston, or whether it's home against San Francisco. But at least if you get to 5 and 6, you're relevant heading into Thanksgiving night at Lambeau.
I couldn't tell you the last time I haven't covered a relevant Dolphin teams in December, Barry, and I'm putting my money on that. So on that note, Dolphins in depth, we're out. We will see you on Wednesday. We'll see.